everyone, and welcome to Schwab Coaching. My name is Cameron May. I'm a Senior Manager of Trading and Derivatives Education here at Schwab, and this is Getting Started with Thinkorswim. And today is all about comparison, comparing one stock to another, a stock to an index, a stock to another asset class. Really, for traders, that's a primary driver of what they do on charts. So I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. We're going to be going through 6 powerful comparison tools that are available on Thinkorswim charts. Before we can get to any of that, though, let me first of all say hello to everybody who's already chatting in. Great to see all the familiar names. Great to see some new ones out there. But hello there, JDLMI and Olga, Rojo, Richard, JB, Texan, Kevin. Who else is here? Let me scroll up here a little bit. We have Bill, everybody else. Thanks for joining us week after week. We always do appreciate an attendance, your contribution. We appreciate your attendance and contributions to these discussions. If you are among those that are here for the very first time, I want to welcome you as well. And if you're watching on the YouTube archive after the live stream is concluded, enjoy the recordings. A great way to watch these webcasts. But be aware that you're invited to join us in the live stream. This is a Wednesday webcast series if you like to be here. And we kick things off promptly at 2 Eastern time. Now, I also want to let you know that my very good friend Brent Moores is going to be hanging out in the chats, addressing any questions that I can't get to as they come in. Brent and I have worked together now for more than 20 years, so Brent brings a ton of experience to this. Thanks for having my back there, Brent. Brent and I would also like to issue an invitation to everybody watching live or on the recording to follow us on social media. It's the best place to connect with your favorite presenters when the camera's not on. So you can find Brent and me on X. You can find Brent there at Brent Moores CS. You can find and follow me on X at Cameron May CS. You can also find us on LinkedIn. Go to linkedin.com/in/Cameron May CS to give me a follow. But let's get into this discussion. And of course, as we do, we need to first pause to consider the risks associated with trading and investing. So bear these important disclosures in mind. All corporate or issuer names and market data shown are for illustrative purposes only and not a recommendation, offer to sell, or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research, and any investing decision you make in your self-directed account is solely your responsibility. All right, so let's set an agenda for today. As I mentioned, today's going to be all about comparison. We have some great tools available on Thinkorswim charts. I'm going to be taking us through 6 tools that might allow a trader to compare a stock to an index, a stock to a different asset class. So I'm going to be introducing the tools one at a time. We'll explore how they might be used using current examples, then we'll move on to the next one. And by the time we're done, we should be pretty comfortable with the navigation of these tools. So let's go right to the Thinkorswim desktop platform. Here's the S&P 500. We're having a pretty good day. Looks like we're might push up there toward an all-time high close. We'll see, still a couple of hours of trading left. But I wanted to talk about this comparison. So let's just go over here to our watch list in the left column. And I have the S&P 500 component companies loaded up here. They're organized from largest to smallest. Let's just start right up here at the top. And if I click on NVIDIA, here's the year, the last 12 months, I should say, for NVIDIA. And if we compare that now, let me just click on Apple. You'll notice Apple's had a similar year. But one thing that's just inherently a shortcoming of comparing one stock to another just visually is that all of the trends can look very similar. Proportionally, they can look the same, even though at times they can be very different. So here's our first tool that might assist with a comparison. Let's just stay here with Apple, and we're going to switch this from on the y-axis over here, the price axis. We're going to change this from being displayed in a dollar denomination to a percent change. And that can allow for a more standardized, more meaningful comparison across a range of different symbols. So I don't know if you were aware of this, but you can make this is probably our quickest thing that we can do. We'll just go up here, click on the little gear icon. Someone says the left edge is cut off the video, Rice Bird. Don't know what might be going on there because from my display it looks, no, it looks all right to me. Maybe the tiniest little slice, but keep me posted if that continues to be an issue. Anyway, let's come up here to that price axis on our gear icon. So if you missed that, we're just going to click on the gear. This is our chart settings icon. And up in the upper left, we're going to click on the Price Axis tab. And I don't know if you've ever checked this box before, Show Price as Percentage. So you'll notice, if you keep your eye over here, that the dollar amounts are going to change here as I check that box. Click Apply. And now we can see the percent change on Apple. And this is customized to the time frame of the chart. So if I click OK now, I can see that Apple so far is up about 30, what is this? About 37% over the last 12 months, or on a 1-year daily chart. And I can now compare that in a more meaningful way to other stocks. So for example, if we click back here to NVIDIA, boy, these looked very similar, didn't they? Just eyeball those. Well, Apple went sharply up, left to right, and then kind of consolidated sideways. NVIDIA went sharply up, left to right, then consolidated sideways. But NVIDIA has actually outperformed Apple to the tune of about 3% for every 1% gained by Apple. That's a big deal. So just that one little chart change can allow us to go through a series of stocks very quickly and do a more meaningful comparison. So now, as I go through this, a comparison of historical performance, obviously is not a guarantee of future productivity or future performance. But let's go back here to Apple. That's nice to be able to do this one stock at a time, but sometimes what we'd like to do is see both at the same moment. It's nice to be able to see the percentages, but also the charts themselves. So tool number 2 is to pop up here to the upper right, click on this little menu icon. This is a series of 3 dots and 3 dashes, and we're going to detach the chart. What that does is it opens that chart. It essentially creates a new window. So we have this independently operating window of a new chart. And we can move that around. And one thing that I want to note for those of you who use linking, you'll notice here we have the number 1 selected just to the right of the symbol. We have the number 1 selected just to the right of the symbol. Let me unlink those so I can now change the symbol, and it doesn't change it on our other sort of home chart. And what we could do now is we could maybe move this chart over to a side monitor. I have a monitor over here to my left. I have a monitor over here to my right. How about I pull this over to my right monitor? And if you can envision this now, I'm looking at Apple here on my primary screen, and I see NVIDIA over here to the right side, and I can do a percentage comparison. I can do just a visual chart assessment at the same moment. So a deeper level of comparison available. So that's nice. We've learned 2 different ways to compare charts: the prices percentage tool, the detach function. But what if I would just want to fit it all on one monitor? Not everybody has this multi-monitor setup, nor do we always have access to it even if we have it. If I pick up my laptop and I haul it away from my 3-monitor setup, now I only have 1 to work with. JDLMI is asking, can we compare on the same chart? I'm going to show you a number of ways to do that. Yep. So let me do this. Let me bring this extra chart out back. I'm going to close that out. Okay, so now we're just back to 1 chart. We've already seen the watch list. We don't need this. I'm going to just close that up. But now I'm going to split this display area in half and look at 2 charts at the same time. Now, as I do that, maybe I want those 2 charts to be very similar, so it's kind of as much as possible an apples to apples comparison. So let's add one more thing just to complicate things a little bit. Let's say that our investor is looking at a candle chart. They're also looking at percentage change, and maybe they have a favorite technical indicator. So let me pop up here. Let's add just an indicator. I'm just doing this sort of at random. Let's select maybe the MACD histogram. This is a momentum oscillator, sometimes used by traders to look for potential price floors and price ceilings or changes in momentum from buying to selling. Basic concept here would be to look for a deep dive into bright red as a sign that maybe stock has come down to lows. If we're up into bright green, maybe the stock is closer to short-term highs. So this might be more of a timing comparison. But now let's create 2 charts on the same chart at the same time. And for that, we're going to use our grid chart up here in the upper right. Now this grid chart, we can actually select any number of, not any number, actually as many as 4 rows and as many as 8 columns of charts. But let's just choose 2. So I just move my cursor around until I can see 2, and they're configured the way I want it. I can have one chart above the other, or I can have the 2 charts side by side. Let's do side by side for just a moment. So I'm going to click there, and now I have this second chart. Now, one thing I want to show you, if we load up NVIDIA now, that's going to be our comparison chart here. You'll notice we have 2 very different charts. And I could go in and rebuild all of this, but there's another thing that we can do. Right up here under styles, let me click on this, and we're going to save this style of chart in the left side, and then import it over to the right side. So we're going to save this style. And one thing I'm going to make a point to do is check the box that says, make sure that we include the studies that we've added. So that would be our MACD histogram. So how about we just call this one, what are we going to call it? I don't know, basic stock with MACD. Good enough. Any title you want to give it, it would be serviceable for you, but let me just click save. Now, if I want to import those same chart settings, I can just pop over here, click on our little style icon, and I can load the style that I just saved, and there's our basic stock with MACD. And you'll notice now we're looking at, oh, this is a much cleaner comparison. We have the same time frame. We have a percentage change on our y-axis, and we have our study down below. This literally saves all the elements of the charts that we've customized. So this is a quick way for a trader to now set up. In this case, I just did 2 charts, but we could do 4 or 6 or 8 in different configurations, type in different symbols. We can load that chart style that we've saved and do that comparison. So that's sort of nifty tool number 3, powerful tool number 3 for doing comparisons of charts. And obviously with these, we can go further than what we've done here. We can actually change the time frame. And actually, if I saved the style as a different time frame, if I was on a 6-month chart or a 5-year chart or a 20-day, 1-hour chart, it saves the time frame as well. So when I load that on my NVIDIA chart, it looks just like the Apple chart. But in any case, we can make those changes manually. Let's see who's been doing what over a 3-year time frame. So I'm going to switch this one to 3 years. Let's pop over here. Change this to a 3-year time frame. It looks like NVIDIA up about 620%, Apple up about 65%. So if a trader is looking for, let's say, something that has a longer term propensity for larger moves, they might lean more toward NVIDIA. Obviously, larger moves can work in either direction though. So volatility can drive things up, we can drive things down. But here we can do those comparisons. It looks like in both cases, on that longer term view, that MACD has dropped low and is starting to rise over recent weeks. We're seeing that on both. Interesting. All right, let me just consult with my notes here. I always like to make sure that I'm showing everything that I intended to show. And there's one other thing. Let's come over here, switch this back to a 1-year daily view. And how about we want to compare our stock to an index? Well, we can do that just as easily as another stock. We just type in the symbol in our extra chart over here, and it's showing us, all right, so Apple over the last year up about 37%. The S&P 500 over the last year up about 35%. So Apple pretty much moving somewhat in step with the S&P 500. Let's see. Oh, JB Texan says, can we write notes to each chart independently? Right now, anything I add to one also shows on all others in the grid. Now, JB Texan, what that will do is, let's say that we're looking at a single symbol over multiple time frames within a grid. And then on our 1-year chart, we make a note and it pops into our 6-month chart, it pops into our 3-month chart. Yeah, what we'd want to do is, as we're creating that drawing, down here, use the drawing set. And so create the drawing, and and save that as a drawing set. And then we could just switch it on the new time frame to a default, or we could save a brand new drawing set, and it just keeps them separate. Yep. All right, good question, but let's go on with cool tool number, what are we at? We've done prices percentage, detach, grid. Let me introduce you to an indicator that can be used. Let's do this. Let's come back here. If you're wondering, how do we go back from 2 charts to 1? You know, one other thing that I might show is there is this feature. I've shown this in previous webcasts, but when we have 2 shown side by side, if we want a closer look at just one, but quick access to the other one, we can just click on the little menu icon in the top right of either one and choose maximize cell. So what that's going to do is it's going to allow this one chart to occupy the full screen space again. Let's maximize that cell. And now we're just looking at a full screen view of Apple, but we have access to the other one with our arrows up here in the upper right. So we can click the arrow, move to our other chart or to our other charts, back and forth. And if we want to switch back to seeing both, we just click this reverse or max or minimize cell icon. And there we are, we're seeing both again. And then finally, just to get rid of the extra one, we just change our grid selection. And we're back to 1. So there we go. We have 3 powerful tools for the comparison of charts. This next one is an indicator. Now we already have the MACD here. Let's go back up here to our little flask icon. I'm going to remove MACD. Let's click apply. And instead, we're going to use a tool called correlation. Now, how many of you, pardon me, no, that's not, that's sort of, that's a teaser. We're going to do correlation in just a moment. I'm going to do comparison because somebody asked if we can have both of them literally on the same chart at the same time. Can we just put both symbols? Stop playing games with me here, Cameron. We're still using separate charts to look at separate symbols. Can we put both of those symbols on the same chart at the same time? Yes, we can. So that's known as a comparison chart. Let's add that. And what this will do by default is whatever symbol we have currently charted, so we're still looking at Apple, it's going to compare it to the S&P 500. That's okay. Now, as we do this, I'm going to make a couple of suggestions for maybe cleaning up the comparison chart a little bit. You may have a different thing in mind than what actually appears on the chart. So if I click apply and click OK, what we're seeing here now is Apple is our candlestick chart. And the S&P 500, we can see this right up at the top. It says comparison is the S&P chart, SPX. That's our purple line chart. Now, the problem here is we're now comparing two different distribution mechanisms. We're looking over here at the right. Our Apple is being displayed in percentages. The SPX is being shown on a points scale. So 2 different incompatible scales, not really a fair comparison. It's still showing how they've done each compared to one another over the last 12 months. But here's what I want to do. I want to just show them both as a percentage on the same chart at the same time using a single scale. So we need to make a quick change to our chart settings. I'm going to come up here. RiseBird says Thinkorswim has so much flexibility, so many ways to maneuver, you forget features. Yep, yeah, some of these might be what were familiar features. I think this happens all the time when you watch our webcast. You say, oh yeah, I knew that, forgot about it. Yep, I do the same thing. So I'm going to come up here to the chart settings. Let's get rid of this sort of complicating left scale. So I'm going to come over here to the gear icon. Since we're dealing with price comparisons, we're going to go to the price axis. And here where it says enable left axis, I'm going to uncheck that box. Click apply, click OK. And now what this has done is it's now showing both of these charts, but they're really operating on very different scales. And what it's done is it's kind of squished them right now. There's still a line chart, there's still a candle chart, but they're sort of crushed down to the bottom. Now comparing an index to a stock is going to result in a more extreme example of this. If we were to compare, let's say, Apple and NVIDIA, it won't be quite as extreme. So we kind of need to zoom in on this. let me show you how that works. Right up here in the upper right, there's an auto feature that sort of it automatically positions the vertical arrangement of these charts, and that's what's causing it to kind of squish down at the bottom. I'm going to change that to manual, so I can do that manually. And what that allows me to do is I can come down to the bottom now and just do a click and a drag to highlight just the portion of the chart that's interesting to us. And I'm going to zoom in on that. There we go. That's a little more meaningful. We can see, and I could even do that again if I wanted to. We can see how this is changing over time. So now we're seeing a percentage increase and pretty close to a dead heat, just like we saw earlier. Apple up about 37%, the S&P about 35%. And we can see how closely those have aligned over the course of the last year. We can change our time frame if we want, of course. We can go to, let's say, how about the last 10 years? Let me zoom in on that. Gives us an opportunity to practice with that zoom feature. Let me switch that to manual. I'm going to zoom in right down here at the bottom, and we can see those changes. So where the two have moved pretty much in step with one another this year, over a 10-year time frame, totally different story. Apple up about 1,100%. The S&P up about, what, 244%. And then we can just extend this comparison to, compare stocks. Let's customize this, all right? So as I showed you, when we added this comparison tool using our Edit Studies icon, the default comparison was the S&P 500. It's not the one we're stuck with, though. We can just come back here, click on the little click on the little flask icon, and I can click the gear. Anytime we see a gear, this means that we can customize a tool. In this case, it's going to be the comparison tool. And I'm going to customize that to compare Apple to, should we do NVIDIA again? Why not? Let's be consistent. Let's type in NVIDIA as our secondary security. Click OK, click Apply. And now we're seeing over a long time frame, 10 years, it's performed so sharply. Boy, I got to drag NVIDIA back into the screen. Notice what I'm doing here off to the right. I can change the scale. That is dramatic. How much is NVIDIA up over the last 10 years? Yep, a lot. If I want to get a closer look at this, now I can just click and drag. There we go. Yeah, Apple, as good as it's had a run over the last 10 years, up 1,000%. NVIDIA up 22,000%. Yeah. All right, let's switch this off. I think we've acquainted ourselves now with the comparison tool. Let me just take that off. I'm going to click the little X, click Apply, click OK. So now we're just back to a standard 10-year weekly chart for Apple. Let's go back to a 1-year chart. And let's look at another technical indicator that's intended for comparison purposes on the Thinkorswim platform. This is going to be sort of powerful tool number 5, and that is the relative strength tool. Maybe some of you are familiar with this tool, but what it allows the trader to do is to compare a stock to another stock, or a stock to an index, or a stock to something else. Which of these two things being compared has been relatively stronger or relatively weaker over a selected time frame? So here's how we're going to do that. Going to go up to our little flask icon. Let's type in relative for relative strength. And we're going to choose that from our menu. Click Add, and you'll notice what are we comparing this to by default? This is going to show whether Apple or the S&P 500 has been relatively stronger or relatively weaker over, in this case, a 1-year time frame. So let's click Apply and click OK. And if you've never acquainted yourself with this indicator before, there are 2 lines that we'll want to keep an eye on. The first is the red line. And the red line is just a point of comparison showing us how our stock, or whatever we have charted up here, has performed against the denominator symbol. In this case, that would be the S&P 500 over the last year. When we see the blue line under the red, that means that for that time frame, that Apple has underperformed the S&P 500 since the start of the year. So if I come over here, what you'll notice is the blue line is just slightly above the red line. That's because we know Apple has outperformed the S&P 500 by a couple of percentage points for the entire year. But at other times, if we were to look back a few months ago, well, from 1 year ago, actually Apple had underperformed up to that point. Then it started to outperform. So this blue line is just an ongoing comparison line to show us whether Apple is being stronger or weaker than the S&P 500. So you'll notice Apple got off to kind of a slow start, starting from 12 months ago. Well, at that time, the S&P 500 was actually having a pretty good run. And so what we'll see is this blue line going down. When the blue line is heading down, it means that Apple is underperforming the S&P 500. When the blue line reverses course and starts to go up, it means that Apple is beginning to outperform the S&P 500. You might just think, well, can I just look at a chart for that? Not just looking at Apple, not by itself, we can't tell that. Because there are going to be times where maybe Apple is going up, but the S&P is going up faster. So we would still say that Apple is underperforming. And if that were the case, we'd still see our blue line going down. Apple is relatively weaker. This is a relative strength comparison. Now that's important for some traders. Here's one thing that they'll look for. When our stock has been underperforming our index, some traders will look for a change in that condition by drawing lines. So for example, we start to see a downward slope right here. We might connect some of those, the tops of some of those rallies, basically, in relative performance, to identify a downward trend line. And for some traders, if we see a break of that trend line, that downward trend line on a relative strength, they might see that as a signal that, boy, our stock is starting to improve against the S&P 500 in significant ways. And that may signal from about right here. That's about where we started to see that increase in strength. That might signal that our stock is about to go for a run. Obviously, it doesn't always work out. Now, the opposite is also commonly identified as a sign of weakness. If our lows on relative strength get broken, so we establish an upward trend line by drawing across the lows on relative strength, if we see a reversal of the relative strength through that trend line, a trader might see that as a sign that price is likely to start heading down in a significant way. And in this case, that was the case. You can see how Apple, even though it had really been doing very well right up to that point, this is where it starts to underperform the S&P 500 again. And from there, Apple really hasn't accomplished much. So, interesting comparison tool known as relative strength. If this is your first introduction to it, hope that was a helpful demonstration. But we want to move on now to nifty tool, powerful tool number 6 for comparing stocks or indices. By the way, should we do this? Let me show you one other thing before we move on to that other tool, because we have the time. It doesn't always have to be the S&P 500. We've learned several times throughout this presentation that tools and features and settings on Thinkorswim are customizable. And in this case, we're going to come back up to our tool. Let's go to Edit Studies. Let's go to Relative Strength. And I'm going to click on the little gear icon. And instead of comparing Apple to the S&P 500, let's compare it to NVIDIA. So let's choose correlation with security symbol NVIDIA. We'll click OK. We'll click Apply. And now we see a very different scenario. Let me clear this drawing set. What we're looking at here now is, here's where the race between Apple and NVIDIA started 12 months ago. And guess who's just won the whole time through? Sometimes Apple has been really underperforming versus NVIDIA. Other times slightly outperforming, but never quite catching entirely back up. So here, when we got a break of this trend line, let me draw that in. We have this downward sloping trend line. maybe a trader who is looking to change the distribution of cash allocation between their Apple and their NVIDIA positions. When they saw maybe back here in early August, Apple's starting to finally outperform NVIDIA, maybe they changed their allocation a little bit on the evidence of this break of a downward sloping trend line. And that was the time when Apple started to run, but so did NVIDIA. So Apple really only outperformed a little bit. And then it started to struggle again. And really net, yeah, Apple has not outperformed NVIDIA at any point over the last 12 months. Let's see. MBH says chart for each symbol. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like this. It's just amazing. Very good. And Ira says that's interesting. Chart for each ticker or all on one chart. I think, well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there, but I'm glad MBH, this was an interesting discussion for you. But now I think let's move on to that final tool. All right. We've been talking about comparisons. We use a comparison tool. I want to talk now about correlation of different stocks or correlation of different parts of the investing world, because sometimes we're told, oh, maybe we ought to buy, let's say, gold as a hedge against equities, or maybe sometimes a trader is looking for diversification, but they unintentionally buy two stocks that really just kind of perform just like each other. So it might as well have just purchased twice as much of either one. So let's talk about a tool called correlation. So I'm going to clean up this indicator before I shut it down. Let me right click here. Let me just clear that drawing set. And now let's come up to a little flask icon. I'm going to remove relative strength and replace it with our correlation tool. I started to load this one a little bit earlier, got a little bit ahead of myself. So let's do this here. But let's add this to our chart. And you'll notice a couple of important elements of this indicator. Number one is it says the number 10. What this is doing is it's looking back over the last 10 bars. On a 1-year chart, it just means the last 10 days. And we're going to be checking out the correlation of Apple to the S&P 500. So here, let me explain to you what that means if you're not quite getting what correlation implies. All right, so what we're left with as we load up that indicator is this red oscillating line. It just goes back and forth between a range of 0, there's not not 0, -1. You can't see a -1 down here, but it goes down to -1 or up to +1. And what this is doing is it's looking over the last 10 days and seeing how correlated have the movements of Apple been with the S&P 500. If over the last 10 days, every time the S&P has gone up, Apple has gone up, and every time the S&P has gone down, the Apple has gone down, we just say that those two things are 100% correlated. And instead of saying 100%, it's just 1. On the other hand, if every time the S&P goes one direction, Apple goes the other direction, and that just is the pattern for the last 10 days, those are inversely or negatively correlated 100%, and we'd have a value of -1. And finally, if the two just seem to just not really be paying attention to one another, sometimes Apple goes up with the S&P, other times Apple goes against the S&P, they're not highly correlated, that would have a value of 0. Yeah. Thank you, Brent. Yes, a very nice summary for someone there. Greg says, can you combine indicators down below together in the same space? You mean you want to layer them on? You can certainly add them independently. Short answer is yes, actually you can, for some indicators, load them up separately, and then drag one on top of the other one. I'm not going to show that today, but yeah, it can be done. Anyway, but I think you get the point here with our correlation tool. Bottom line here is what some traders will do is they're trying to gauge, well, how strongly is the S&P influenced by Apple? How strongly is Apple influenced by the S&P? How strongly correlated are they? They'll load up this tool and maybe just keep an eye out on this sort of thing. Well, is most of the time, is our indicator above zero? Is it around zero or is it below zero? So as I draw a green box here around the last 12 months, I think this kind of highlights the point. Apple and the S&P 500 are fairly highly correlated. And as a matter of fact, over the last 10 days, 85% correlated. So one is strongly influencing the other or vice versa. It just kind of makes sense, right? JDLMI, you never knew about this correlation tool. This tool can allow us to start to explore other relationships that we've been told have been the case, but we don't have the evidence for it. So like how many of you have been told, oh, well, what we do as a hedge for the S&P 500 or equities, we buy some gold or buy some Bitcoin or buy something like that, because the concept is if equities struggle, maybe the cash will move to something else. Maybe it'll be gold, maybe it'll be Bitcoin, maybe it'll be something else. I'm not advising you how to diversify a portfolio. I'm just talking about these sorts of rules of thumb that might enter the marketplace. This is where it might be tested to see if that's the case. All right, so let's do a couple of things. First of all, we're not stuck with just looking over the last 10 days. Maybe that's interesting. That's sort of the default for some. How highly correlated have things been over a relatively short period of time? We can lengthen that. So if I come up here to the little flask icon again, click on my customize icon. Well, I wonder what the correlation of Apple and the S&P 500 has been over a period of, let's say, a month or about 20 trading days. Let's click OK. Actually, if we want to do that, let's put in 21. That's more accurately a month's worth of trading. Let's click OK. Let's click Apply. And yep, that highlights that correlation even more. Yeah. Over a short period, there can be departures in that correlation. Sometimes Apple can work independently of the S&P 500. But over the longer term, the correlation shows up stronger and stronger. All right, well, another thing that we can do is change the comparison itself. Let's go up here to our time frame. Let's change it back to the default. But I wonder how correlated, let's do something obvious. Shall I do something? I'm going to do this. Wonder how correlated lows. Let me click OK and click Apply. This right now is comparing lows. Oh, no, I didn't get it done. Hold on. Let's do it again. We're getting some repetition here. I didn't hit enter. So when we type in our symbol, hit enter to activate that symbol. Then click OK and notice now it's getting ready to compare lows to Apple instead of SPX to Apple. It's not lows and Apple that I want to compare here. Let me click Apply and click OK. They're not highly correlated. You know what is? Home Depot and Lowe's. Yep. So this is just sort of an exaggerated example of how things can be strongly correlated. Maybe for a day or two, Lowe's and Home Depot can break away from one another, but generally as one goes, so goes the other, right? But let's do some other comparisons. What about the S&P and gold? Let's come up here. Let's change this back to the S&P. Hit enter on your keyboard. Click OK, click Apply. And let's change our other symbol to gold. There we go. What's the correlation there? Not a strong correlation. So does it look like maybe gold and the S&P can kind of work independently at times, at least compared over short periods? Yeah, we could lengthen that comparison. We could actually just switch the time frame up here to a 3-year chart. Still looks like not a lot of correlation, although where is most of it? If we're just trying to identify the bulk of it, there's a little bit higher correlation, I think, between those two asset classes than some might initially suspect. So I think you're getting the idea. You can see how potentially important comparisons, potentially powerful comparisons can be done between equities and indexes, between asset classes. And with that, we've actually accomplished everything that I set out to do today. I wanted to talk us through 6 powerful tools available on Thinkorswim charts that might allow for comparisons to happen. So I thought this was going to be a fun one. We talked through price as a percentage, the detach function, setting up grids, the comparison tool itself. We did relative strength and the correlation tool. So this is what we do on Wednesdays. We explore the tools and the features available on the Thinkorswim desktop platform. And I hope that you'll put it in your calendar to either join us live on Wednesdays. Again, we kick things off at 2 o'clock Eastern, or you can watch these things as a recording. These webcasts are recorded as they're delivered live, and then they're added to our YouTube channel. So as I wrap things up, let me give you a quick reminder. Number one, if you're new to this webcast series, or if you're just new to our webcasts overall, make sure that you subscribe to our channel. It's called Trader Talks Schwab Coaching Webcasts. It's on YouTube. And this channel is where you can join our live streams, or you can find the playlists of previously delivered webcasts. So for example, this one's called Getting Started with Thinkorswim. We just click on playlists, and mine happens to be, out of all of our different webcast series, all the way down at the bottom. So keep scrolling until you find Getting Started with Thinkorswim. If I click on View Full Playlists, I can see last week's discussion. I've been out of the office for a couple of weeks, so Barb was filling in for me, and there's Brent. But you can see our full slate of archives there. So, hey, by the way, Brent, thanks for, oh, actually, sorry, I'm going to take that back, Brent. You didn't fill in. Now, this is actually a webcast that Brent did a couple of years ago. Just an excellent one. Anyway, this is where you can find the archives. Now, another thing that I would suggest you do is to follow us on social media. You can find and follow your favorite Schwab presenters on X and on LinkedIn. And if you reply to one of my posts on either of those platforms, I just try to reply right back to you. It allows for interaction in between the webcast or the live streams when the camera's not on. So first of all, if you want to find and follow Brent on X, you'll find him there at Brent Moore CS. You can find me on X at Cameron May CS. And as I mentioned, if you reply to one of my posts, like this one I had yesterday, I've already replied to these 5 people that have left a comment there. I really like that connection can be made through social media, but you can also find and follow us on LinkedIn. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, you go to linkedin.com/in and then /Cameron May CS. That's my handle on LinkedIn. Give me a follow there. I make longer posts on LinkedIn typically. Sometimes they're the same length, other times they tend to be longer because I don't have that character limit. So that's nice. Somebody says, every time I draw a trend line, it doesn't draw a trend line, it zooms in. What are you doing wrong? Yep, trend line, pretty quick, just a quick explanation of that. Use 2 clicks. What you're probably doing is a click and drag. Just release you make a click to start the line, move over, click again to end the line. That's what's happening. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching today. Definitely appreciate your time and your attendance. Thanks to everybody that's already clicked the thumbs up. I can see about 100 people watching the live stream right now. 27 have already clicked that like button. That is received as kind of like applause for your presenter, so thank you. But it also gives my videos a nice little boost in the YouTube algorithm, helps more people find these discussions, like the 6 powerful tools that might allow comparisons on Thinkorswim charts. Guys, go have a great day. Enjoy our upcoming webcasts. We still have several, we have a couple left on the slate. So go enjoy those. I will look for you in one of my future webcasts. I'll also look for you on social media, on X and on LinkedIn. But whenever I see you again, until that moment arrives, I want to wish you the very best of luck. Happy trading. Bye-bye.